Someone takes a photo at a gathering, a dinner, a birthday, a casual evening with friends. They post it, tag everyone in it. And within the hour, there's a quiet message from one of the people in the frame. Hey, could you take that down? Not because the photo is unflattering. Not because they were doing something they shouldn't have been. Just because they don't want to be there. Online. Visible. Available to whoever happens to scroll past. The person who posted it is probably confused. Maybe a little hurt. They meant well. But the person who asked doesn't have a complicated explanation to offer. They just know with some certainty that they don't want their image circulating in a space they didn't choose to enter. Most people will read that as oversensitivity, or as something vaguely suspicious. What are they trying to hide? But neither of those reads is accurate. The psychology of people who genuinely don't want to appear on social media is more deliberate and more coherent than those explanations allow. Let's start with a distinction that most people collapse without realizing it. There's a meaningful difference between using social media and becoming content on social media. Most people treat these as the same thing, or at least as naturally connected. If you're present at an event, you're implicitly part of the documentation of it. But for the people we're talking about today, those two things are entirely separate. One is a choice they make about how they consume information. The other is something that happens to them without their consent. Psychologists who study objectification theory, originally developed in the context of gender and media, but with much broader applications, describe a fundamental shift that occurs when a person becomes an image being circulated and evaluated by others. You move from being a subject, someone with interiority, complexity, a life being lived, to an object. Something to be looked at, assessed, commented on, shared further. The person in the photo has no control over what happens to the image once it's out. They don't choose who sees it, what context it appears in, or what conclusions people draw from it. For people with clear psychological boundaries, this shift is not trivial. It's a transfer of something that belongs to them, their likeness, their presence at a particular moment, into a space governed entirely by someone else's choices and the mechanics of a platform they didn't agree to be on. The fact that the person who posted it meant well doesn't change the fundamental dynamic. Good intentions don't restore the ownership that was transferred without permission. These people aren't asking to be invisible. They're asking not to be made into content. And that's a reasonable thing to ask. Now let's talk about what happens once an image is out there, because this is where the psychology of control becomes very specific and very concrete. Once your image exists online, it has a life that is entirely independent of you. Someone else can share it. Someone can tag additional people in it, expanding its reach in ways you never anticipated. Comments accumulate, some kind, some not, some simply strange, and you have no say in any of it. The platform's algorithm may surface it to people you've never met, in contexts you never imagined, months or years after it was originally posted. Research on digital identity and perceived control has found that the sense of losing control over one's own information and image is one of the more psychologically significant stressors in the digital environment. Not because people are fragile, but because control over information about oneself is a genuine psychological need. Erwin Altman's foundational work on privacy established this decades before social media existed. People need to be able to regulate the flow of information about themselves as a basic component of psychological integrity. When that regulation is taken away, even casually, even with good intent, it produces a real and measurable sense of violation. For people who feel this acutely, the concern isn't paranoia. It's an accurate reading of how digital information actually moves. They understand, perhaps more clearly than most, that a photo posted today doesn't disappear when the moment passes. It persists. It can be found. It can be taken out of context. It can end up places and in front of people that the person in the image never consented to. Recognizing that clearly isn't excessive caution. It's just paying attention to how the environment works. The third piece of this is perhaps the least obvious and the most psychologically precise. These people don't want the kind of attention that social media provides. And this is a more nuanced point than it might first appear. Because it's not simply about being introverted or shy. It's about the specific quality of the attention that social media generates, and why that particular quality is something they actively don't want. When your image circulates online, you become visible to a passive audience. People who don't know you, who have no relationship with you, who are encountering a snapshot of a moment and drawing conclusions from it. That audience may be enormous, or it may be small. Either way, its attention is impersonal. It sees a surface without any access to the context, the history, the actual person behind the image. Psychologists who study social recognition and belonging have identified a distinction that maps closely onto what these people are experiencing. There is a difference between being seen and being known. Being seen means being visible, your image, your presence, your surface appearance, registered by people who are watching. Being known means something far more specific. Being understood by people who have invested time and attention in actually knowing you, who hold a complete and contextualized picture of who you are. Social media generates the first. For some people, it generates it in enormous quantities. But for people who don't find value in being seen by strangers, that visibility isn't recognition at all. It's just exposure. And exposure without relationship doesn't satisfy any genuine social need. It just creates the feeling of being observed without being understood. These people aren't avoiding connection. In fact, many of them have rich and deeply satisfying social lives, built on actual relationships with people who know them well, who have earned their trust over time, and whose attention means something precisely because it comes with genuine understanding. What they're avoiding is the simulation of connection that social media offers, the likes, the views, the passive acknowledgement of strangers who encountered their image for 3 seconds while scrolling through an endless feed. These people aren't avoiding connection. They're avoiding a specific kind of impersonal, context-free visibility that they find uncomfortable in a way that's difficult to articulate but easy to feel. They want to be known by the people who actually know them. The rest of the audience, the passive, anonymous, scrolling audience that social media delivers, isn't something they asked for, and it isn't something they want. So let's be clear about who these people are. They're not hiding. They're not antisocial. And they're not making a statement about anyone else's choices. They're simply clear about their own. The person who posts freely and the person who never wants to appear aren't in conflict with each other. They just have different answers to the same quiet question. What do I want to hand over to the public, and what do I want to keep for myself? They're not hiding. They're not antisocial. They're not technophobes or people who don't understand how the world works. They are people who understand, quite precisely, what happens when your image enters a space you didn't choose, who it goes to, who controls it, what you lose in the transaction. And they've decided that what gets lost isn't worth what's gained. In a world that has come to treat online visibility as the default and opting out as the aberration, these people are protecting something that has become increasingly rare. The right to live your life without performing it for an audience that never asked to understand you. There's a difference between living your life and performing it. These people chose the first one. If that resonated, leave a comment. I'd like to hear your thoughts. I'll see you in the next video.